Afade Hamzu todos Guanahuzo Meega Padu Meekungok Estigo Nuevo na episode Fanachu. Welcome to another episode of Fanachu. As you know, on Fanachu, we talk about Chamorro things from all sorts of different perspectives. A lot of times we're focusing on political status. We're talking about decolonization. We're talking about indigenous rights, demilitarization. We talk about the language and the culture. But one of the things that I really love about Fanachu, though, is that we also document stories of Chamorro experiences, especially those who were critical of the systems of power, those who stood up, who protested. And so in the past, calling yourself an activist was like a very taboo thing on Guam. If you said that you were an activist, your family might get one of those blessed belts and smack you with it to try to, you know, get whatever was ailing you out of you. You know, to be an activist was to stand out in a way that many Chamorros weren't comfortable with. And so, but nowadays, becoming an activist is much more common. It's much more acceptable to speak out, to stand up in the name of a cause or in the name of justice. And so we really have to thank those pioneers who went before, those who spoke out at a time when it wasn't as easy as it is today. And so I'm very thankful to have with me for today's episode of Fanachu, Siñora Lani Tydingco Bordallo, a longtime educator, but also a self-described, lifelong Chamorro activist. And so, Siñora Bordallo, buenas, Idus Masi Tatlu Pari Finatomu. Thank you so much for joining.
Okay. Thank you for asking me. Thank you for inviting me, Mike.
Signora, Hungen. And so, Signora, por favor, tell us first about sort of your family background, because I know that you come from a family which was one of the most outspoken families in the 20th century in terms of political leaders, but also those who spoke out, right, against the status quo, who pushed for something better for the Chamorro people, for the island of Guam. And so tell us about your family and your background, por favor.
Okay, I'm the daughter of Carlos Pelicani Bordallo. They called him Carlito Carlos, and because his father, my grandfather, was named Carlos Pangilinan Bordallo. And my mother is Helen Tydingco. I was born in Essen village. I was actually born at home. I wasn't born in the hospital. And I grew up in Essen until I was like 9 years old. And then we moved to Sinahanya. I went to grade school in Essen Elementary. My mother was my first grade teacher. My mother was like she was grandfathered in as teacher. And then we moved to Adelup, where the governor's complex is now. That was Adelup Elementary. Went to school there, and then grew up. My family was my grandfather moved to Agate, and we grew up with our families, always getting together every Sunday. We'd always be down at Agate barbecuing, and we'd hear our families, our relatives talk about politics on Guam. And so it was just part of our nature. It was just like inbred in us. We didn't even question it. We spoke about things. Of course, I'm just outspoken myself. I just say whatever I want to, whatever I think. But that's how we grew up. We were always campaigning. My father was actually a member of the Territorial Party of Guam. And so I grew up with the Parises, the Calvos, the Tanakas, Um, my godfather is Judge Vicente Regis. And so those were the people that we grew up with. And it was just part of our life. We were always campaigning on going from village to village. And I remember being very young and going to, especially the southern villages where they're mostly from the Popular Party, which is now the Democratic Party today. And we would be driving to the village and they would take the chicken, and what talonan, it's called talonan, and throw the chicken at us. And I'm like, what are they doing? Why are they throwing dead chickens at us, And I guess talonan means we're going to lose the election, that type of thing. And so we just grew up that way. And actually, my activism started, I think, when I went to college. First of all, when I was at GW, I went to GW, I graduated in 1968, and we had, the military was here, of course. A lot of our people were working for civil service. They were working down at the Navy and all of that. And GW, we had not unlike today, we had a large group of military dependent kids going to school here. And they were kind of like segregated themselves so much, they stuck together. They called they had their own club, the surf club. And so we didn't, it wasn't until later years, especially those that remained here in Guam, that we weren't really engaging with them. And then I went to college in the States, and then that's when I started feeling racism. Was when I was back there. I could tell that because I was different, I was treated differently, but it didn't really bother me. I just felt like, yeah, I'm different. But and I went to school in Wisconsin, so it was very, very conservative. And then in the summer of 1970, I was a sophomore in college, came back to Guam for the summer, and my friends, we would get together and go to Carl Tydingco's house in Nimitz Hill. Carlos Tydingco's house, and barbecue there and just hang out and talk about things that were happening here, and Siñor Carlos Tydingco would come and join our conversations and talk to us about that and say things like, oh, I know there's going to be a revolution here in Guam, and it kind of fired us up, and I know the people that would come to our barbecues there in the summer were like Carl Young. He was from Hawaii, but he was very active in the July 7th committee and in our group. Carlos Tydingco's son, Tony Ramirez. Did I already say this? Tony Ramirez. There was John Tydingco. There was Dave Afflecky with Victor Perez from Pago Bay. There was myself, Liz Ramirez. There were just a bunch of us, and we just got together. There was not a formal organization. It was just getting together. And then when we heard about Sedja Bay and how the Navy wanted to take Sedja Bay and make it into an ammo wharf, we were like, wait a minute, what the heck? They can't do that. That's one of the most beautiful parts of the island. And if they were to do that and make it into an ammo wharf, of course, if it's going to be an ammo wharf, they're going to have to cordon off the whole area because it's explosives. So that would mean that in order to get to Burrito and Pneumatic, we would have to go from Agate, go all the way around, go through Jonia, Talafofu, and Alahan, and that way. And we're like, no, we're not going to have this. And we went out at our own expense, of course, and we made this huge banner, very big banner, and it just says "Save Sedja Bay." And we went to we would go to the island had concerts, not big time name concerts or bands coming from the States, just local bands getting together. And at Ricky's Beach, we would set up our banner, and then during intermission, we would go up there and take the mic and talk about Sedja Bay and what the Navy wants to do with Sedja Bay, and talk about returning Chamoru lands, to the original landowners, and why do they need all this land, and all the things that now today we're fighting for. And we had a difficult time because we were not really supported by the community. And they would say, "Oh, you guys are just you're just a bunch of activists, and what do you know? Why are you why are you being anti-Americans?" What they would say. Why are you biting the hands that feed you? You get all this federal funding, you get all this money, you know, and our view was they're not leasing our land. So, you know, whatever they give us, it's not a handout. That's the way, that was our mindset. And so anyway, that's what we
Wow.
did.
No,
And then,
thank you for taking us back to that. So this started as what was called the July 7th committee, right? And so let me just share with everyone. So this is from the Pacific Daily News from way back in the day. And so from 1970. And so nowadays we use social media, we use WhatsApp, but in those days, one of the common ways to organize was to put something in like the observation post in the newspaper or in the events. And so this is the July 7th committee, and this is actually what you're talking about, at Ricky's Beach, the rock festival crowd there. So the July 7th committee, though, it started with just informal gatherings of people who were critical about issues, right? Or who were kind of thinking differently than most people on Guam.
Yes, yes. We were the start, we were the first, actually we're the first protest ever in the history of Guam. And we were protesting the Navy, the military, the taking of our land, and not having representation in Congress, you know, not being full-fledged citizens, American citizens, all of those things that now today we're still struggling with, we're still fighting for. And the July 7th committee was formed because it was July 7th of that summer that we demonstrated in front of the Congress building with our signs that said like draft beer, not boys, save Sedja Bay, you know, things like that. And we just made a laundry list of what we wanted, give Chamorro lands back to Chamorro hands and stuff like that, lower the age of required to run for senator for the legislature to I believe it was 21, it was 25 at the time, I'm not sure whether 21 or 18, something like that, so that the youth can be represented. And so we just forged on, and it was mostly about saving Sedja Bay. That was our big battle then. Then we all went back to college. I came back to Guam and I started to teach. And when I started teaching, it was 1972. I started at Agate Junior. It was Agate Junior High. Now it's Ocean View, and then I went from there. And you know, history of Guam was not mandated at the time. We didn't teach anything about Guam. But at Agate Junior High, I met Larry Cunningham, which is what he was. You know, he wrote that Guam history book, and Jim Kessler, and we were not activists. We were pro culture, you know, trying to promote the Chamorro culture and all of that. We weren't not even speaking the language. That wasn't even part of our agenda. And then it wasn't until I went to to Inarahan Junior High. It's now Inarahan Middle School. And I was teaching civics. And I said, you know, civics is subject to civics is teaching the kids how to be good American citizens, right? So I went to my principal, who happened to be a lot of the teachers were off-island hired teachers. And our principal was from Orange County. I don't remember his name, tall, white guy. And I asked him, I said, you know, can I teach about Guam? You know, and he said, well, if you finish the textbook. So I said, oh, okay. So I ran back and I told my student, let's go run through this book, finish the book. And then I just started taking information and putting it together into a lesson, to different lessons. And I did it like social, economic, geography and topography, things like that. And I presented it to my students and just tried to promote the culture. and the history of Guam, and got involved, really involved with the kids, you know, and these kids are from down south. I mean, they after school they go to the ranch and they pasture the cow and, you know, all of that. And I took them, I took my students, we raised all the money and we went to Saipan and Rhoda for spring break and started teaching. I mean, I think my lifelong activism was with my students, really, and trying to teach them that to be passionate about their culture and their language and who they are, and that you know, to always keep Guam, our island, and our people, whatever they do out there in the world, keep them as a focus, keep us as a focus. Because I often, every beginning of the school year, I always ask my kids, how many of you are Chamoros? You know, they raise their hand, especially GW is very Chamorro. They all raise their hand and I go, are you proud to be Chamorro? And they're going, yeah, I'm proud to be Chamorro. And then I'll ask them, why are you proud to be Chamorro? And they'll look at me like, what? Why are you proud to be Chamorro? You know, why are you proud to be a Chamorro? And they go, and then my students would go, Miss, why are you proud to be Chamorro? And I said, yes, I'm proud to be Chamorro. Why are you proud? I said, because out of all the land in the world, this whole planet, God chose for me to be born in this little tiny dot in the Pacific. And look at us. Look at how beautiful we are. We have beautiful skin. We live on an island. People would kill to live on an island. I mean, just everything. We have all the makings of having a good life. But it wasn't. And then people from the outside came in and took over. And this is what we've always been struggling with our whole entire lives. And when I tell my students, when we're going to fight for Chamorro rights, it's not fighting for Guam. Guam is an island. It's land. This is what the military wants. They just want our land. They just want Guam, the island. They don't care about us. You know, they don't care about who we are, our desires, or as a person, as a human being. And that's what we're trying to save, is the Chamorro people, who we are. And you know, it's really, I just want to share with you that I used to teach summer school all the time, every summer. And back in the day, summer school was always at one school. They would be at JFK, GW, and I would always have a lot of students from the Philippines, the Filipino students, and they would say, "Oh, you know, Miss, you sound like you don't want us to be here." And I said, "No. Especially we're talking about self-determination and all of that." And I go, "No, you know, for whatever reason, your grandparents or your great-grandparents chose to pack up and move to Guam. They made that choice. It was a choice that they had, and they exercised that choice. They can't come to Guam and then decide, oh, I'm here and I want rights, every rights that everybody else has. But with us a Chamorro, Guam is our only country, our land, our island. I can't just go pack up and move to the Philippines if anything happens and say, oh, I want to be. What would happen if I packed up my bags and moved to the Philippines with my family and say, oh, I want to be just like every Filipino and have every right that they have, blah, blah, blah. They'll say, no, you're not from here. And that's not it. We're not saying we don't want you here. We're saying we need to be recognized and respected and given that freedom to govern ourselves, to decide what we want for our island and our people. I've never really believed in the two-party system and all that American system, whatever. But when I met Angel Santos, that's when I really got my activism really, I would just say, exploded. But he came to GW. I was already teaching at GW, and he came here as a speaker, guest speaker. But I already heard about it. He was he had organized, I think it was called Chet Loose at the time. And I know that there were a bunch of, Chamoru guys, I think. And he was speaking at one of the other teachers' class. So I said, oh, I want to meet this guy. I want to see what he looks like. So I went to his presentation, and our eyes kind of like locked, when we saw each other. There was this affinity that we had. And then he invited me later to join Jetloose. And I said, I think what they did back then was they would take the cigarette, right, and burn. There would be 3 in a triangle. That's it's their emblem, and they would burn it on their arm. And I told him, I said, I'll come to your meeting, but I'm not going to burn my arm to be a Chetlu. I'm just not going to do that. And so then I became we became close. Then became Chamorro Nation, National Chamorro, and all of that. And so I got involved in that way. And Angel and I became quite close. He told me about how he was in the military in the States, and that's when he started feeling racism very strongly. He was back there. He said him and some of his buddies would go down into the city when they had time off, and they'd be walking, and white people would just yell, racial slurs at them and everything, and it started bothering him. And then he came to Guam. He was in the Air Force, and he was stationed at Anderson Air Force Base. I'm just relating to what he told me, and it was around that time that Governor Bordallo, Ricky Bordallo, shot himself, and he was rushed up to Naval Hospital. And Angel told me that he was in the radio room with a bunch of guys that were in there, and they were all laughing, saying, "Oh yeah, he shot himself." And Angel said he got up and he walked out, and he never went back. And that's when he started all his activism and all of that. So, and he would, and then I started slowing down because a lot of the activities that they were doing, I wasn't really like climbing the fence or being out there all the demonstrating at all these places. That wasn't really my thing. But I would go to the meetings and try to contribute in that way. But most of my activism is really in my classroom and talking to my kids and instilling, telling them to be proud of who they are and to whatever they do as they move forward, to always keep your island in your heart and do what you can. And then and that's basically what it is. I try to speak out when I can. I would write letters to the editor way back, like when the military gave the Navy, already knowing that they were going to close down at their base in the Philippines and their base in Okinawa. They knew that they were going to be moving them to Guam. So what did they do? They gave the land where Southern High School is now, gave it back. They gave it back and said that's where the new school could be built. And to me, it's like you're giving land to us, to the government of Guam that already belongs to us. It was us to begin with. It's not. It wasn't yours, and then now you're graciously giving it to us when there's an ulterior motive there. And the ulterior motive is that you're going to have all your dependents here and need a school. So I wrote a letter to the editor about that, and my letter was read out on the radio on AM radio. It was by Dave Eckert. At the time he was a DJ, and one of my teacher friends called me and said, "Hey, they're reading your letter out on the radio." And so I called up and Dave said, your letter is pretty radical. And I said, well, what's happening to us is pretty radical. And he's saying, what? It's there's a lot of there's places in America where they take the land and they make for bases and all of that. And I said, yeah, but You just came to Guam and you just took Guam. And I said, you didn't ask us if we wanted you to be here. You know, you didn't ask us what we thought. You didn't try to find out what our feelings were. You just took us and forced everything upon us. We didn't invite you here. So we're not American. We're not part of America. We are our own people. And you're trying to you've tried to mold us into what you want us to be, and as a way of controlling us. And it's just not going to make, it's just not something that we're comfortable with. And I think after all these years from Cedra Bay to today, all of these years, constant, you know, and the youth finding out that yes, we've been slighted here. And so now the activism is more with the younger people. And I'm so happy for that. I really am. I'm very happy to see that.
Again, no, Signora Sidus Masi for sharing, you know, for sharing your experiences and for making connections. And I think that one of the most important things in you sharing is a reminder for those who are younger today that they build on the work of others who have come before, who have spoken out, who have used, whether they were jumping fences or whether they were inspiring their students, you know, whether they were protesting or whether they were enlightening and educating, that, you know, so many have come before to do this work. And so that the next generation builds on that. And so I wanted to give you a chance though, because I know, you know, your father was part of the, you know, he was part of the political landscape. And so I know you shared he was also in charge of the port for a while. And did you want to talk a little bit about your father and what he did for the island?
Oh, okay. My father was only a one-time senator, but I remember that everything that he did was really for the territory, really for the island. And I remember he was an activist as well in his own right. And I remember he when he was a senator, this lady, I'm just trying to recall everything. I don't know who she was or anything, but she came to my dad, and at that time, they were advertising here in Guam for jobs in California as apple pickers or whatever, picking apples or whatever in the orchards. And so they said, you know, you can work and you can send money home to your family and all of that. So this one family, the husband left and went there, and he had 9 children here, I think, on Guam. But when he went there, he lived on the plantation. They have barracks, and so they would take money out to pay for rent for him staying in the barracks and food at the commissary or whatever. So he had hardly anything to send home. So his family was starving over here, and so this woman asked my dad to help, if he could help bring him home. So my dad, at his own expense, flew out to California and went to look for this guy. And when he was there, he met Cesar Chavez. And I think that's what got my father, fired up about being an activist himself. And when he came back, he brought the guy back. He paid for whatever had to be paid for and brought him home. And even when he was the manager of the port, I remember him telling me that the people that were running the, like, Matson and all these other shipping lines were coming in. They would come in and they would talk to him and talk down to him because he was a local, you know, not. And my dad said it just got to him, and he just stood up and he said, "You can't come in here and talk to me like that. Why do you think you can talk to me like that? Because you're white and I'm not." But my dad was actually white. But anyway, and so I could see this activism in him, and seeing that there were inequities, you know, in the way that we were being treated here in Guam. And he was so against the Jones Act. I mean, that was his biggest pet peeve was the Jones Act. And sad that, you know, he died in 1983. So, you know, he didn't live very long to really fight for his island. But he was part of the 8th Guam legislature, 1964. And And Uncle Ricky Bordallo was he was like, he's to me he was like larger than life. He was this man, this leader that was really. I remember when that campaign before he took his life, before they were going to take him to jail was the reason why he took his life. But anyway, he went to Washington and he said, he was governor at the time, and he said, give us liberty or set us free. In other words, give us more civil rights, give us the right to run our own lives, to run our own government. And when he came back in that next election campaign, oh my gosh, he was being watched by the military so closely. I remember when he had that big rally down in Agania, and there were these helicopters, those helicopters that they used in Vietnam to bring the bodies down, and they were just hovering over us, like and I think that America saw the power that he had here on Guam. He was a very powerful governor. He had a very large following. Everybody just loved Uncle Ricky. Very eloquent speaker in English and in Chamorro. And so I think they went after him for that. And he got arrested and they were going to send him away. It was only, I think, for 4 months, but he was not going to have it because I believe that he felt they were going to end his life back there, and that's why they wanted him back there. And I think that's why he took his own life rather than go back there and serve this 4 months. But
wow. Signora,
yeah.
So this is from the Pacific Daily News in 1990. I believe, is this a comment from you? It says, Lani Bordallo, Bordallo's niece, said he left the people of Guam with a message. He would want us to stand together and fight for our rights, regardless of our political affiliation.
Yes, I think he did. I think Uncle Ricky was more of there's no Republican or Democrat anymore. In America, you can tell the Republicans and the Democrats because they're very conservative and very liberal. But here in Guam, we all know each other. I mean, you can't go and say, "Hey, I think that guy's a Republican or whatever." We were all, and he wanted us just the only way that we're going to win our civil rights and our self-determination is together as one people, not divided into the two-party system and all of that. And so, yes, I think that was what Uncle Ricky wanted for us.
Yes, and so let me ask you, because the Bordallo family is filled with some going from BJ Bordallo, your uncle, who
my grandfather's brother, yeah.
Again, who was a pioneer for civil rights and for political rights before World War II, traveling all the way to Washington, D.C. with F.B. Leon Guerrero in 1936. Then, Ricky Bordallo and Paul Bordallo, and I wanted to ask you, did you ever talk to your uncle Paul Bordallo? Because he was one of the most critical people around that at that time that I'm familiar with. And so did you ever have any conversations with him? Because I know he was somebody who was strongly in favor of Chamorro rights.
Yes, I've never really sat down and spoken to him, because when our families get together, the older ones get together, young ones get together. But I know that he was the one that wrote the Chamorro Land Trust law. And it wasn't very popular, of course, because people felt that, oh, you're just going to single out the Chamorros, and only Chamorros going to own land, and blah blah blah. And so it was kind of like put in the back burner. But he was very a real fighter for Chamorro rights. But I never really sat down and talked to him about it. No. Now Uncle Ricky I have, but not Uncle Paul. And Uncle Ricky, he's I think I think he was trying, I think in his political life, he was trying to stay somewhat neutral. It's almost like, what I liken it to? It's like John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, and Uncle Paul's the Robert Kennedy and Uncle Ricky's the John F. Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy was the one, with the civil rights and all of that, and Uncle Paul was really like behind the scenes guy, and Uncle Ricky was the one that led and that's how I see the two of them.
Oh, wow, Sidus Masi. And so we have some questions that have come in about Celibate and about the July 7th committee at that time. And so when you were mentioning that, you said that you would gather at Carlos Taitano's house and that his father, who was a speaker, a senator, also a pioneer, Carlos Taitano, that was supportive of all of you gathering, talking. And so do you find, the question comes from Siñora Lilian Cruz, Hafade, Siñora Lilian, Sidus Masi. She wants to know, were other parents or other elders also supportive of your work in the July 7th committee? Or was it something where that there was no manamko at that time, or none of the sort of established leaders who were supportive of what you people were doing?
No, we didn't get any support from the manamkos. They felt like they're from the war time. They're from the time where America saved us from the Japanese. America's our savior, and so no, they didn't support us at all in our fight for Chamoru rights and for self-determination and for giving land back to and that was our focus, was really to get land to save Sedgwick and for the military to give back the land that they've taken from us, especially land that they weren't even using anymore, and to give it back to the original landowners. And that's what we were fighting for. We did not get support. If we did, I don't know who it was, but we did not get support from our elders. They in fact, they admonished us for speaking up.
Again, so this protest that you described on July 7th at the Guam Congress building, how did the elected leaders respond though? Did they run and hide? Like they were afraid of you protesting, or did they come out and talk to you? Do you remember anyone who was very antagonistic, like condemning, or was it? Did they just try to avoid?
I don't remember anyone. I don't remember anyone coming out and speaking against us, and I don't remember anyone really supporting us, in our endeavors. I could be wrong. I don't know, but frankly, but we did get support from them because we would have our meetings at the Congress building in one of their conference rooms. That's where we would meet, and we wrote letters to New York Times, and we wrote letters to the Washington Post, and some of them were published at that time, and it was about Guam and the Chamorros not having a full citizenship and not having representation in Congress, and what are we going to do with them, and stuff like that. And I remember, so yes, we were supported. We must have been supported by the congressman at the time, but yes, they were more. Even our only representative to Congress was Wampat, and he. I don't know what to say about him, but he was there for a very long time, but he was supportive of the military and being on Guam. He was supportive of Sedgwick Bay. He was the military taking Sedgwick Bay and making an ammo wharf and saying that it's going to bring all this money, all this money to Guam. They always say that, but it never happens that way.
No, Hungan here, Senor, this is from the Pacific Daily News in 1971. And it says, at a recent luncheon, Wampat, referring to Tony Wampat, who was the rep. So it wasn't the official non-voting delegate, but he was Guam's territorial rep at that time. he said that he was surprised at the concern from the island's younger leaders over the Celebes issue. Many strong protests were raised to the acquisition of land and the construction of an ammo wharf at the southern end of the island. He says, one point which may not be known to very many of our youth, Swampet said, is the economical aid received from the federal government from income taxes collected from military personnel stationed on the island. Swampet said, and so it's interesting because it's, it goes back to what you mentioned at the beginning, is that, the military has a lot of land. It doesn't lease the land on Guam. So the money that we receive from the federal employees that work and live on Guam, that isn't, it's not a lease. It's not an agreement. It's not a contract, right? No status of forces agreement.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the problem of what I think even in the 1970s, you were all recognizing, is that they use our land, but they don't pay for it. We don't get compensated for it. We get an indirect benefit from it. But yes, so here's some articles. These are some articles from that time about that even there was some newspaper coverage in like 1973, which talks about that the U.S. was facing a revolt in the Pacific, which talked about the Celebes protest and how people were not supporting the military building an ammunition wharf at Celebes. And so you definitely had an impact. You definitely had an impact on that in terms of creating a situation in which the military was frustrated and delayed. Couldn't get.
And they eventually backed off. They eventually backed off about using Sedgwick. So I think we won. I think we won that one. And we did save Sedgwick. And so when today's youths were protesting about the what do you call it, the Poget issue and the shooting range and I'm saying, hey, we saved Sedgwick. We can do something about this too. So I think I believe we did have an impact on what was happening at the time, especially with Sedgwick.
Oh, absolutely. And so I wanted to share a video real quick. It's of one of the members of the July 7th committee, the late Tony Ramirez. So this was actually to help make the connection across generations. So when the military buildup was first announced, the current one, there was all these sites that were going to be impacted. And so the group We Are Guahan organized a series of hikes to areas where they would be threatened by militarization, such as Poget, but also areas where they were sites of protest in the past. And so we took people down to Celebes, for example, and then Tony Ramirez, who was the curator of the Guam Museum, the position that I have now, he welcomed all of the people at the start of the hike at the overlook there, and he although this is the SETI Bay one, because we went from SETI to Sela. And so he then told a little bit about your activism in the early 70s. And so let's just watch it.
People make money out of wars. And in order to acquire more profits, you have to take more resources, whether it be land, whether it be oil, whether it be coal or whatever. But profits have to be made. And that's why a lot of the colonizing powers have large standing armies to maintain those profits. And so 40 years ago, the military wanted to build the ammo wharf down there. And there was a small group of college students who formed an organization called the Now Organization. And anyway, a couple of friends we were invited to attend one of the meetings. And the meetings occurred up at the house of Carlos Tydingco. Carl, I guess his son is Carl Tydingco. He's very much involved with with GATE and on a lot of the economic development out here in Guam. And anyway, it was sort of like a social organization, and we were just talking about various issues, and people were talking about the latest music, the latest bands, and so forth. But we brought up the issue of Seja Bay, and we said, this is a very, it's a very paramount issue, and something that we have to address, because we cannot allow the military to take more of our very limited finite resources. So anyway, we brought up the issue of staging a protest at the legislature to coincide with the arrival of Ruth Van Cleave, I think, who was probably the Undersecretary or the Secretary of the Interior. And also there were other congressmen from California. Philip Burton, who was really who's very instrumental in a lot of federal laws that were introduced into Congress related to Guam, and other Congress people. But also there were a lot of high Navy officials, including the commander of the Pacific region. So anyway, out of that NOW group, not everybody agreed to have a protest, so we decided to form our own little group. And there was probably only about maybe 10 or more of us that got together. And the key organizers for that group were myself, John Tydingco, a guy from Saipan by the name of Joaquin or Jack Villagomez, and also Carl Tydingco. And but some of the people that were there were John Pangilinan, his brother, I can't remember his last name, but anyway, also John Camacho, and even Debbie Bordallo she kind of picked her up, and Lani Bordallo, and my cousin Elizabeth. So we were the only ones. And anyway, we made a whole bunch of protest signs, like Yankee Go Home, Free Guam Now, a lot of issues related to the military taking over Seja Bay, our protests against that, and also other issues related to self-determination, particularly independence. So anyway, we had all of our signs, and anyway, in that NOW group, there were a couple of daughters of Manil Jose who were in part of that NOW group, and they informed their father, Manil Jose, who was the editor of the Guam Times Weekly. And what he did was they staged a counter protest. They also had their professionally done signs, because they had a publishing company, so they were very us, with our real simple signs. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that we know. So anyway, there was a counter protest, and anyway, we came up with our signs, and it was we were not confrontational at all. We just we were there with our signs, and we just putting it just right in front of their faces, and
Don't be
Oh, and so did that and so I wanted to share that though. So he mentions a few more people, and I saw you nodding your head. And
Yeah, I forgot about Jack Villagomez from we used to call him House of Gomez, because it's really go. He's from Saipan, very, very active too with our organization. Who else did he mention that I forgot? John Tydingco, John Pangilinan. Yeah, there were several of us. We were starting to get a following, from people that agreed with us and shared our views. But like I said, it was short-lived, because we were all in college, and we were all going back to college, and so that's what happened.
so do you remember he mentioned that there was a counter protest?
I don't remember that.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
remember the counter. Yeah, I don't remember that counter protest, but there might have been, yes.
No, but it's interesting. I mean, so at that time, sort of the Vietnam War was going on, and sort of you going to college in the States, and so what at that time was really kind of pushing you and others to think differently than your parents' generation? Like, I know that so many Chamorros went to Vietnam, so many died, came back with issues. What were the things that were kind of inspiring you to think differently?
The fact that we were fighting in a war that we have, that we have nothing to do with. I mean, it's not our war, and that we were sending our boys over to get killed for something that we're not even a part of. When you're fighting for something, you're fighting for something. We're fighting for a country that wasn't even wasn't even looking at us as part of them. We were not full-fledged, and we still aren't American citizens, but you want us to go and die for you? And those are the things that were bothering us, I think, that fact. And then we're going over to a country where we were shooting and killing people that look like us. I mean, we're all brown people, and that's what we were doing for a country that did not even recognize us as part of the United States, as part of them, as full-fledged citizens. We were not. And then taking our land, that's another thing. I mean, our island is not even that big. And then preventing us from really expanding so that we can grow our economy ourselves. Yeah, just didn't, it just didn't jive with us. We just did not. And those were the things that we talked about a lot. The military presence here in Guam. And you know, back in the day, what do you call that? The military, you know, the military dependents and the families and whatever, their cars, they even have their own license plates. You know, if you're in the Air Force, your license plate says AF, Air Force. If you're in the Navy, it says USN. So, you know, those cars never get pulled over. They could be speeding, they never get pulled over because they're in the military, they're military. I mean, I just had this bitterness. And then when we have events, right? Like I remember the Mess Chamoru, opening the Mess Chamoru down at Chamoru Village, and we always have the dignitaries, and they would all be sitting in the front in their white suits, you know, and I'm like, you know, why are we always celebrating them as if we're supporting whatever they do to us, you know? It was like an okay. And I just didn't agree with that. Why do they have to be there? That's just the way I am anyway. And I can't speak for all of my friends, but I think we all thought it along the same lines. The military is just not our favorite.
I'm good.
Mhm. I even remember when Dave Eckert was read my letter, and he said, I said, you know, he says it's inevitable, and he goes, anyway, you know, you're going back way back when we're here. America's here. We're here to say blah blah blah. And I said, yeah, but you can still right the wrongs that you did. It's like let's say your great grandfather stole a pickup from my great grandfather, and years later, we're saying this is what you did wrong. And we're supposed to forget about it because it's over and it's inevitable and that's it. No, you wrong. You right that wrong, and you give us a new truck or whatever and return it back to us. And that's what America needs to know. They need to recognize that we were not part of America. But that's what we need. We need that recognition to say, yes, we're wrong. I mean, Spain even came out several years ago, maybe about 15 years ago, and said what we did in colonizing all these, you know, these places was wrong. We were wrong. So if they're admitting that they were wrong, then America is wrong to be here. What they did was wrong, then America is wrong to be here, to have taken us from Spain after the Spanish-American War. So they're not here legally, they're here illegally. And we should, as a Chamorro people, have that right to vote and to say whether we want them to stay, want them to go, we want to affiliate with them, you know, decolonization. That's our right as a Chamorro people. And everybody knows if they're Chamorro or not. You know, you ask anybody, are you Chamorro? Nobody will say, oh, I don't know, let me check. You know you're Chamorro. If you're Chamorro, you know you're Chamorro. Nobody ever says, oh, wait, let me ask my mom, or let me ask. So to question who is Chamorro and who isn't, it's not even an issue. So this Davis thing, you know, it just gets my blood boiling, and I don't even want to talk about that. And so for when we come to the point where we're going to vote for our political status, it should be Chamorros and their descendants. And okay, if you want to say Chamorros include those who were here at the time of the Organic Act, fine. There's still, you know, there's still more Chamorros than whatever. And it should be a Chamorro only vote. That's what I think.
Again, no, definitely. I think no, thank you for putting it out there so clearly. I think even just something like what you mentioned, how, you know, around the world, so many people have the ability to sort of determine their destiny through their government, through their laws, through their constitutions. And the Chamorro people, we know the wrongs that have been committed. So the question is, how do you make it right? And is making it right taking more things away from the Chamorro people? No, we know what was wrong. So what we do now is we empower, we protect the rights of Chamorros. We don't take more away from them. And so, but it's so inspiring to hear somebody from, you know, a generation before me, the generations before me, to kind of who were already starting to put those ideas out there. Like to hear, you know, for some of the newer activists, the idea of land back, you know, it's so inspiring to hear that in the 1970s, there were already Chamorros who were saying land back, land back to the original landowners, land back to the people. And so for the last part of this, because we're almost out of time, Dispensas or Signora, I want to give you a chance to share some final thoughts or a message for the next generation, the coming generation of activists, as somebody who, you know, was an activist when it wasn't cool to be an activist. Sort of what's your reflection that you want to share with future generations in terms of this struggle?
What I would like to share is that what we did back in the 70s was a passion. It was coming from our heart. It was something that wasn't popular, but we believed in it, and then we did it. And what I say for future generations is continue what you're doing now, and maybe not get as emotional as I do, but continue to fight for our rights, because, you know, there's going to come a day where all of this is going to come down to yes, every people has a right to determine their own destiny, to forge their own way and do it proudly and with their parameters of their culture and their heritage and whatever, and continue that fight, because it's going to come. It's going to come. Not in my lifetime, but down the road, it's going to come. And then when we do it, and even if we make mistakes, at least there are mistakes, and we can say, okay, we made a mistake, but it's our mistakes. But not right now, when things happen that are wrong, we can always blame America, because, you know, they're here and they're the ones that are guiding us. They're supposed to be guiding us to self-determination since 1898. That was their purpose, you know, to guide us to become self-governing, self-sustainable, and all of that. And they've never done that. They've always kept us from it and made us feel like we needed them. We need them for everything, that we're not capable of doing it. They've always treated us like that, so paternalistic, like they can't do it, although we're not intelligent enough. I'll tell you, we're more intelligent than a lot of people in America. If you just go to America and you just go around, I just go around there and I see all, you're so, you know, and we know our government, we know our senators, and we know our governor. We know, because we're engaged with them. We go to parties and we meet them. We talk to them. We grew up with them. This is part of us. So we know what we want and what we need for our island. And yes, we want to share. You know, I used to take my students on that riverboat cruise, it's now Valley of the Leche, and take them there. And we'd be going down, and other boat would be coming and be full of Japanese tourists. And I tell my students, wave to the Japanese, you know, and they wave to the tourists, and they'd wave. And then I would say, okay, class, what's the best thing about a tourist? And they would say, they don't stay. You know, come and share in our culture and on the beauty of our island and our people and our hospitality, and go home and share it with wherever you came from. But we don't need anybody else. We don't need any more people here. we're crowded. We're crowded. There's just too many people on Guam already. And that's what we want to do. I want Chamorro culture, and I want down the road people to recognize who we are, and that we're good people, and we're colorful, and we're loving, and all of that. That's what I want to share with it. Always keep your island and your people, forefront in whatever you do, whatever endeavor you have, and make sure that it's for our kids and our children down the road.
Gof bonito ano, Señora Jesus Masi. Thank you so much for that statement. Thank you so much for joining and for sharing your story, and sort of celebrating the label of Chamorro activist, instead of people saying, instead of saying, oh no, I'm not an activist, you say, Hungan, activist, so I am an activist. And it's okay to be an activist. It means that you believe in something strongly enough that you will speak out about it, you will protest, you will make a stand in the name of something that you believe in. And so, si Diyos masi, Señora Tatlo, da si Diyos masi no hamsu todas ni umeeka, umeekong da no umeega, esti Fanachu, esti na episode Fanachu. Adios.